Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to have a PowerPoint presentation with this as well, so it'll kind of tie everything together as we go. Before I get started, though, I do want to thank Sue Berry. She was very instrumental in helping me get some of this information. When she went back to Washington, she got scans of his pension records for me, and that was really nice of her, and I really appreciate that very much. I'm still working on his life history, to be honest with you. I don't have a photograph of him, not that I've found, and I'm still looking into his background, but we'll go from there. My great-great-grandfather, Perry Green Brock, was born near Kansas City, Jackson County, Missouri, on May 11, 1832. He was the fourth of 7 children born to James Brock, who was originally from North Carolina, and Ladecia Ann Dicey Moore, who was born in Kentucky. I don't have a lot of information on his early life, but I do know that his father was a farmer, which makes it a pretty good bet he was a farmer. And in fact, the 1860 census lists his occupation as a farmer. Although looking at his 1863 Civil War draft registration records, it lists his occupation as a miller, so he must have done some milling during his life as well. He married Mary Ann Hokett, who was born on November 13, 1835 in Platte County, Missouri, on February 20th, 1853 in Jasper County, Missouri. They, along with their 5 children, were living in Center Creek, Jasper County, Missouri in 1860. I'm going to talk a little bit about his Civil War history. What I've done is I've incorporated the story of his regiment and his military service into the big picture of events that were happening in Missouri at the time, so it kind of makes sense. If I say, yeah, he fought at Byram's Creek, everybody's going, well, where the heck is Byram's Creek? Nobody knows much about Missouri's Civil War history. So what I've done is somewhere in here, there'll be a map, and I'll kind of go over that as we go along. And there's some historical backdrop included with this story. In 1863, Perry and his 2 older brothers, Terry Wiley Brock, here on the left, and his other brother, Dr. James Wilburn Brock, enlisted in Company G of the 2nd Provisional Missouri Regiment under the command of Captain William Ray. The regiment was redesignated the 7th Provisional Enrolled Missouri Militia Regiment, PEM, on May 19, 1863. Dr. James Brock had prior military experience and had served as a regimental surgeon for the Union Army at the Battle of Pea Ridge, Arkansas in March of 1862. The 7th PEM was assigned scout and patrol duties and were also tasked with hunting down Confederate bushwhackers and guerrilla groups operating in central, southwest Missouri, and as well as northwest Arkansas. And some of these groups were led by men like William Quantrell on the left and George Todd on the right, and also by Bloody Bill Anderson, which is the next. Bloody Bill Anderson on the left. Now, most people have probably seen the movie The Outlaw Josie Wales. In there, Bloody Bill Anderson is depicted by John Russell, who's a really old actor. In reality, Bloody Bill Anderson was only about 23 years old when he was rampaging through the state causing havoc. In October 1863, when Confederate Cavalry Commander Joe Shelby entered Missouri, the 7th PEM pursued him to the Osage River and as far back as the Arkansas line. In Berry County, Missouri, the 7th PEM overtook Shelby and almost destroyed his entire force, causing him to leave all his dead and wounded on the field. In the summer of 1864, the 15th Missouri Volunteer Cavalry Regiment was created to replace the 7th PEM. Company G of the regiment was mustered into service on August 27th in Springfield, Missouri. Again, 1864, there again under the command of Captain Ray. Soldiers moving from the 7th PEM to the 15th Missouri Cavalry were given a retroactive enlistment date of November 1863. This made the federal government responsible for their PEM back pay, as the state of Missouri had not been real good about paying its soldiers. This also gave the soldiers credit for their 20-month enlistments for some of the time they'd already served. The 15th Missouri Cavalry Regiment consisted of 12 companies, A through M, with no Company J. Depending on what records you look at, there were anywhere from 80 to 87 men in the company. The Missouri State Archives show a register of 81, while the National Park Service shows 87. Of the 87-man roster, 41, including Perry and his brothers, were holdovers from Captain Ray's Company G. These 41 also included almost all of the officers and non-commissioned officers from the old Company G. 10 non-PEM men had prior military service in other units, and 36 were serving in the Union Army for the first time. At least 3 men in this company had previously served in the Confederate Army. And this makeup of this company is probably typical of all the regiments in that company in that regiment as well. The 15th Missouri Cavalry Regiment was commanded by Colonel John P. Allen and was attached to Brigadier General John B. Sanborn's 3rd Brigade. This is John Sanborn on the right, as part of General Alfred Pleasanton's Cavalry Division. Overall command fell to General William Rosecrans, who oversaw the Department of the Missouri. We can go to the next slide. And that's Alfred Pleasanton on the left. General Samuel Curtis, who plays a part in this later on, is on the right. As part of Pleasanton's division, Perry's regiment participated in several engagements with Confederate General Sterling Price's army when he invaded Missouri in September 1864. We can go to the next slide. That's Sterling Price on the left, and the general on the right is James Blunt, who will also play a role in this a bit later on. We can go to the next one. This is a map showing Price's invasion of Missouri in September of 1864, so you'll get a good idea of where my great-great-grandfather fought a lot of his engagements. Price hoped his invasion would divert forces from the eastern sector of the war from Richmond and Atlanta. He hoped that the invasion would also enlist Confederate troops, seize or destroy Union material, and he hoped by accomplishing this, he would embarrass Abraham Lincoln and would damage his upcoming re-election hopes. Price's army consisted of 3 divisions of cavalry commanded by Generals John F. Fagan, John S. Marmaduke, and Joseph O. Shelby. Designated the Army of Missouri, Price's force numbered about 12,000 men. His invasion started out kind of on a bad note. He was defeated at Fort Davidson near Pilot Knob, Missouri in September. As a result of that, he entered at the far right there, if you see the red line, and Pilot Knob is up there on September 27th. Then he decided not to attack St. Louis and Jefferson City because they were too heavily fortified. As he moved his force through the middle of the state towards Kansas City, he destroyed railroads, burned buildings, and pillaged the countryside, all the while being pursued by Pleasanton's cavalry division, including my great-great-grandfather's 15th Missouri Cavalry. On October 19th, Price swept away a Union force commanded by General James Blunt at Lexington, Missouri. Blunt was part of the Army of the Border commanded by General Samuel Curtis, who was stationed with his army on the Kansas-Missouri border near Kansas City. Blunt made his way back to Independence and was driven across the Little Blue River by Price on October 21st. During the battle, Confederate guerrilla leader George Todd was killed. The Second Battle of Independence occurred on October 22nd when Pleasanton finally caught up with Price and engaged divisions of Fagan and Marmaduke, where he captured about 300 men and 2 cannon. By the end of the day on the 22nd, all Confederate forces had fallen back across the Big Blue River. On October 23rd, Price found himself caught between Pleasanton and Curtis at Westport, Missouri. Pleasanton's cavalry attacked the Confederate rear forces at Byram's Ford, while the rest of Price's army was engaged with Curtis at Westport. Westport ended up being the largest battle fought west of the Mississippi during the war and was a resounding Union victory. Only a flanking action by Joe Shelby saved Price from being totally annihilated. Price retreated south and through Kansas and camped at the Marais de Seigne River in Lynn County. On the night of October 24th, General Sanborn's 3rd Brigade and the 15th Missouri Regiment skirmished with Price's rear guard but disengaged without participating in any heavy combat. On the morning of the 25th of October, Sanborn was reinforced by cavalry under Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Benteen. They now had a combined force of 3,500 men, and they drove the Confederate rear guard from their positions north of the river. Later at noon that day, Union and Confederate cavalry forces fought at Mine Creek, also known as the Battle of the Little Osage in Lynn County, Kansas. Mine Creek ended up being one of the largest cavalry battles of the war. Later in the evening on the 25th, Union forces skirmished with Price's cavalry at the Marmaton River, also known as Charlotte's Farm in Missouri. All three engagements on the 25th resulted in Union victories, and the engagements proved devastating for Price as he lost Generals John S. Marmaduke and William Cabell were captured, along with 600 men and 6 cannon. Price retreated further south, and by the time he arrived in Newtonia, Missouri, which is down in the far left-hand corner of your map there, his army was exhausted, and he only had about 3,500 men left from his original 12,000-man army. Current Newtonia boasts a population of about 209 people and lies 10 miles east of my hometown, Neosho, in the far southwest corner of the state. The town looks much the way it did in 1864, except now the roads are paved and there's some mining activity going on there. While Price camped south of the town near the McLean Farm, Union pursuers under his old nemesis, James Blunt, caught up with him on the afternoon of the 28th. Blunt drove back the Confederate skirmishers, and Price withdrew his main army to Arkansas, leaving Joe Shelby's division as a rear guard. That's Joe Shelby on the left, one of the best Confederate cavalry commanders of the war. The two sides exchanged cannon fire, and Shelby began to get the better of Blunt, who was considering a retreat shortly before sundown. Suddenly on a ridge just outside town, Sanborn's 3rd Brigade appeared and took up position on Blunt's left flank. Sanborn's cavalry counterattacked Shelby and drove his forces from the field. Sanborn is often credited with saving the day for the Union forces at Newtonia. Shelby rejoined Price as he retreated through Indian Territory, which is present-day Oklahoma, and into Texas. Price's defeat signaled the end of Confederate military operations in Missouri. Guerrilla activity also was less prevalent, with the deaths of guerrilla leaders George Todd on the 21st and Bloody Bill Anderson on October 26th in Albany, Missouri. Well, the building on the right is part of the battlefield at Newtonia. That's the Ritchie Mansion. It served as a field hospital and headquarters for the Union troops. You can go to the next slide. That tells you there was actually 2 battles fought at Newtonia, the first in 1862. This is part of the battlefield at Newtonia. This is where the Confederate forces charged through the cornfield, attacking Blunt's forces. And this is where also my great-great-grandfather's regiment counterattacked and helped drive Joe Shelby's forces from the field. You get a better view, it's out there in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful country. Although Price's expedition in Missouri was a failure, he did his best to put a happy face on it. In his after-action report to General Kirby Smith, dated December 28, 1864, Price reported he was gratified with the results of his operation. He wrote that he had marched 1,434 miles, fought 43 battles and skirmishes, captured or paroled over 3,000 federal officers and men, and captured large quantities of blankets, shoes, and overcoats, and also destroyed about $10 million worth of property. So he was a busy guy during that time. I'm going to go a little sidebar here because I find this interesting. Anyway, going back, I want to talk about Robert H. Christian. He was a first lieutenant in Company K of the 7th Provincial Enrolled Missouri Militia. And when Price got to Newtonia, he commanded a small detachment there. Well, the detachment ran away and they captured Christian. Christian was known by the Confederates as Old Grizzly. He was not a popular individual. During the war against the guerrilla activity, which was a brutal and savage war fought in Missouri, it was neighbor against neighbor. There was atrocities committed on both sides. He was known for having killed civilians by the boatload. He would burn homes of Confederate sympathizers. He would hang them. He would tie women to trees and whip them. He actually cut the head off of an individual and took it home to show his wife. So he was a really fun guy. When he was captured, the son of the man whose head he had chopped off found out about it. He belonged to Shelby's cavalry. He rode up to where he was being held prisoner, said, "This is from my father, you blankety blank blank," shot him several times, proceeded to scalp him. I understand he was alive while that was going on, and then rode through the town, dragging his body, waving his scalp. Christian was retrieved by the women of the town and buried in the Newtonia cemetery. You can go to the next slide. I know it's sacrilegious to sit on a grave, but my legs were hurting so bad, and I didn't think Lieutenant Christian would mind. So that's this past May when I went to Newtonia Cemetery. This is Lieutenant Christian's grave. The reason I bring this up is because there are letters from people after the war talking about his atrocities, and also some of the atrocities that were committed by Captain William Ray. Now, that was my great-great-grandfather's commander, and I'm thinking, even though I don't have any, so anyway, that's the story on Christian. I just thought I'd throw that in as a sidebar, because it's very possible my great-great-grandfather was involved in that type of activity. There's no way to know for sure, because usually in after-action reports, they don't say today we murdered 12 women and kids, burned down 14 houses, and strung up 3 guys from trees. So who knows what happened. Go to the next slide. The cemetery in Newtonia at first contained the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers. About a quarter of the cemetery contains former slaves, but they reinterred the Union forces in Springfield, Missouri after the war, and it left only the Confederates. So there's a lot of unknown graves there. Go ahead to the next one. You get an overview of what the cemetery looks like there. We'll go to the next one. The 15th Missouri Cavalry Regiment spent the remainder of the war camped near Cassville, which is about 38 miles southwest or southeast of Missouri. On July 21st, 1865, Perry and his brothers, all having survived the war, were mustered out of the Army at Springfield, Missouri. Also on July 1st, 1865, Colonel John P. Allen, who commanded the 15th Missouri Cavalry Regiment, wrote a memorandum to the Adjutant General of Missouri, Samuel Simpson. In the memorandum, Allen spoke of the brave and patriotic men of the regiment who were deserving of the praise and lasting gratitude of Southwest Missouri. He also mentioned that during Price's invasion, the 15th Regiment, as part of General John B. Sanborn's 3rd Brigade, participated in all engagements with the enemy forces from Jefferson City to Newtonia. After leaving the Army, Perry and his family lived a short time in Texas, where he resumed farming. By 1870, his family was back in Missouri and living in Mineral City, located in Jasper County. Census records between 1870 and 1900 show he continued to be a farmer for the remainder of his life. By 1880, Perry, Mary, and their growing family were living in Joplin, located in Jasper County. They would have 12 children together. 2 would die in infancy, and 2, including my great-grandfather Perry Dixon Brock, would become Baptist preachers. By 1890, Perry and Mary were living in Seneca, Missouri, a small town in Newton County, about 8 miles west of Neosho, near the Missouri and Oklahoma border. They would remain here for the rest of their lives. In his later years, Perry would suffer from a number of ailments and health issues. His military pension file showed he applied to increase his pension benefits several times due to poor health. Doctor's affidavits in the file indicated he suffered from rheumatism as well as heart, kidney, and lung disease, which I'm guessing was probably tuberculosis or maybe cancer. On November 5th, 1904, Perry died from liver cancer in Seneca. His war was finally over. Mary never remarried and died on June 2nd, 1910. Both are buried in Elm Springs Cemetery. This is their grave sites. My great-great-grandfather on the left and his wife Mary. Elm Springs Cemetery is located in a small clearing surrounded by forest about 5 miles outside Neosho in Newton County, Missouri. This past May, I visited Neosho for the first time in 17 years, and I actually went to this cemetery for the first time ever. The cemetery contains about 30 gravestones, most dating back to the 1800s. It's not maintained, and it's covered, as you see, in weeds and tall grass. We can go to the next one. The road behind there, I'm sure 30 years ago, was dirt. They just began resurfacing these roads not too long ago, and that fence, I'm sure, was not there 30 years ago. So this cemetery just sits out in the middle of nowhere. Go ahead. This is his headstone. Go to the next one. This is just a building near the cemetery. You can see the weeds and tall grass behind it. Okay. just a view of the cemetery. It's old, and it's just in the middle of the country. Why anybody would be buried here is beyond me. In 1904. Go ahead. Okay. Like I said, it's covered in tall weeds and grass, and when I walked through it, I know I picked up some chigger bites. As I looked at Perry's headstone, though, if you ever get to see your ancestor's headstone or where their final resting place is, it's emotional. You know, I had some mixed emotions. I was happy because I got to see it. And at the same time, I was sad because here it's sitting out in the middle of this, you know, God-forsaken piece of earth. And I'm wondering, you know, here's a man who served his country, yet he's lying in some forgotten cemetery in the Missouri countryside. And it made me realize just how important it is for us, the sons of Union veterans of the Civil War, to tell our Civil War ancestors' stories so that even though they may be in some lost cemetery, their memory is not forgotten. Thank you very much.